right, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is you are joining us from around the globe. Welcome to another Neat Insights webinar. We're glad to have you here. Or if this is your first time, we're glad that you joined us. We're here today to talk about driving innovation with Validation 4.0. If you're new to us, my name is James Carey. I'm the virtual events manager here at Neat Solutions. Neat Insights is a series of webinars Neat holds to talk about thought leadership in the digital validation space, talking all things, all issues, all topics that are important to you who might be in the digital validation industry, life sciences, manufacturing, anything that talks about validating a workflow process. So welcome to our webinars. Again, if you're new here, just a few housekeeping things. You are on listen only mode. You're tuning into the broadcast, so we welcome you. You won't have access to your video. You won't be on camera. You won't have access to your microphone either, but we do encourage you to open up the chat box to the right of your video screen, click on that chat button, and you can engage with us in the chat. Let us know your thoughts. Tell us what you're thinking about the presentation, about digital validation, about driving innovation and Validation 4.0 in that chat. But first of all, let us know where you're tuning in from. We love to see how global our audience is. And this one is pretty early, so hopefully we have a good amount of folks from Europe and across the Atlantic. I myself am tuning in from just outside of Washington, D.C. on the East Coast of the state, so it is a nice early morning for me. During the webinar, we'll have an interactive poll coming up here in just a minute. So that's the second button you'll see on the right-hand side of your video. We have chat, we have poll. So go ahead and open that if you haven't already. You can vote in our poll. Let us know where you are in your journey to digitizing validation. We'll come back and look at those results in just a moment here. And finally, on that right-hand side, again, the last button there is your Q&A. In just a moment, we'll hear from Amy, our speaker, about driving innovation, but we want to hear your questions. After Amy's presentation, at the end of the webinar today, we'll do a live Q&A. So any questions put in there, we'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can in the time limit that we have. If we don't get to all of them, do not worry. You can always reach out to us at info@neat.com if your answer is that pressing. Or we'll make sure that one of our representatives reaches out to you. As long as you don't submit it anonymously, we'll make sure we reach out to you and answer that question and give you all the information that you're looking for. We want to make sure that your questions are answered. If we can't do it live, we'll follow up afterwards. And most importantly, your feedback is important to us. Just by registering, you'll receive an email with a recording of today's webinar. When it's done and processed and ready to be viewed, you'll receive a download link for the slides and the presentation, so you can refer back to all the great insights Amy has. But most importantly, you'll find multiple links to give us feedback. We thrive off of your feedback. We want to know what we're doing well. We want to know what we can improve. But most importantly, we want to hear what topics you want to hear about. So I'll cover that a bit more again at the end of the webinar, how you can suggest topics for us to talk about in our upcoming webinars. We're already planning for Q1 of 2025, and we want to kick it off strong. So that's enough of the housekeeping about today's webinar. I want to talk about what you'll be hearing about today. So first, I'll cover a little bit about Neat itself, who Neat is, what Neat GX is as a software. We'll do that interactive poll. We'll see the results of that poll, and then we'll hear our featured presentation from Neat's own senior process engineer, Amy Wilhite. Amy, if you have joined us in our webinars before, has great insights into process validation and Validation 4.0. She's joined us on multiple webinars before, so it's great to have her back. She'll be talking about the overview and benefits of Validation 4.0, aligning validation and Pharma 4.0 objectives, common implementation challenges, updates on regulatory standards, and overcoming those regulatory implementation challenges themselves. And then finally, like I mentioned, we'll come back for a live Q&A to answer all of your questions from Amy's presentation. So before we hear from Amy, I'll try to get through my bit quickly about Neat. This is about us as a company. Neat Solutions is a global organization headquartered in Ireland, but with staff and operations all over the country, all over the world in multiple countries and time zones. We're truly a global company, and we try to keep our operations 24/7. We are a publicly listed company on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and so we are held to a high governance standard. We hold ourselves to a high standard just as a company culture, but we're also held to that standard of being a publicly traded company. And that standard shows we are the software validation, we're the validation software platform of choice for 8 of the top 10 life science manufacturing companies around the world, including 3 of the 4 COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers. We have 45,000 plus users in our software as a service platform with 100 plus customers across 350 plus locations. So truly widespread throughout the world. We also have over 40 certified global partners who work with us to bring our solutions to your workplaces and solve your problems, your validation issues and challenges with Neat's software as a service. All of our development is done in-house. We don't outsource any of our software development, and that is to keep ourselves to that high governance standard like I talked about, and also to make sure that we keep everything secure. We take security very seriously. We are ISO certified with 9001 and 27001 certifications for ISO. We make sure to keep those up annually so that all of our information, and more importantly, your information, is kept secure. So that's Neat as a company. Neat GX is the software platform that we've been talking about. Neat GX is a software as a service validation lifecycle management platform that digitizes validation from end to end, enabling regulated companies, hopefully such as yourself or the one that you work for, to make validation easier, faster, and smarter. Now, all of that means that we take the challenges from validating your processes on paper, keeping binders, keeping wet signatures, tracking down a specific person in a work site or a manufacturing facility to find their signature. We take all of that and move it digitally. All of that paperwork, all of those signatures, all of that test data is now accessible from any smart device that has an internet connection, wherever you are in the world, wherever you are on your work site. Your phone, your tablet, your computer can all access NeatGX to find not only your current validation information and test those processes, but to find all of your past information as well, and keep you audit ready at any time, where you don't have to go tracking through a warehouse full of boxes of paper to try to find that past paperwork when you need it for an audit. So we want to hear about you now before we start the webinar. So we're going to go to our poll here that I mentioned a little bit before. We want to hear where you are on your journey to digitizing validation. So is it starting today with today's webinar? Are you, have you done some initial discovery and you've got some prep work done and you've got discussions done, but you're not quite ready to launch yet? Are you about to launch your first digital validation project? Are you getting ready? Are you about to hit go on that button and you want to stay on top of all things validation? Or are you have multiple projects already being delivered digitally? You're considering how to scale. Maybe you've done it once, it's been a success. Now you want to bring it to other work facilities or places around your company or organization that need to be validated digitally. We've already got some answers in here. Oh, okay, and I see a lot more moving here. This is great. We've got about a third of people in initial discovery, about 10% ready to launch or about to launch, but a good more than half, more than 50% are already have validate projects being delivered digitally, validated digitally, and they're considering how to scale. And now we have a few that are just starting today. This is perfect. We run the full gamut, and this is what we like to see. Because these insight webinars are for anyone in the industry, no matter your exposure to digitizing validation. And we hope that if you're starting out your projects today, you're tuning into Neat. We hope that you give Neat GX a try when you are going for digital validation. Okay, great. I'm going to leave that poll open to see some more results as we come in here, but this gives us a great idea of where people are at. So that's everything I have to talk about. My part is done. We have just a few minutes in here. So I want to go ahead and bring up Amy Wilhite, Senior Process Engineer. As we were just talking about, she's been with Neat for 5 years. She's been in validation and process engineering for much longer than that, I'm sure. But I'll let her tell you about her background. Amy, thank you so much for joining us again. We're really excited to hear your insights here today.
Thanks, James. So hey, folks. My name is Amy Wilhite. I've actually been with Neat, like James said, for 5 years now, as a subject matter expert for digital validation of many processes. So process validation, analytical methods, equipment, facilities, utilities, computer software assurance. So prior to joining NEAT, I was in the life sciences field and biopharmaceuticals for the past 10 years. And 8 of the past 10 years, I have been utilizing digital validation solutions for the various processes that have operated both at small scale startup style facilities as well as large kind of pharma giants. So we have some insights to share with you today based on kind of what we've seen over time as we've been kind of riding this roller coaster of change where everything's kind of going digital. We have Pharma 4.0, and so we're going to kind of get into Validation 4.0 and how that relates. So I'll go ahead and get started. So I wanted to talk about Validation 4.0 and what it is. So it's part of the Pharma 4.0 evolution. So if you see here, we've got some diagrams on the left of the kind of digital maturity pathway. So all of the various systems that become digital along your digital maturity pathway for Pharma 4.0. And so Validation 4.0 is one of those pillars. So you have whether or not it's a data-centric approach, like the top one, or a process-specific approach, like the bottom one there, you still have these pillars and you're still kind of evaluating your digital maturity level based on which pillars you have kind of adopted digitally in your process lifecycle. So you can see there digital validation is just one of these pillars of the Pharma 4.0 evolution. So for Pharma 4.0, I think we've all probably seen webinars on Pharma 4.0. We're familiar enough with the approach. It's been something that's come up a lot in new regulatory publications like again 5 from ISPE, as far as something that we're constantly seeing as a trend in the industry that we're being encouraged to move towards for digital ways of operating for our processes. So some of the enablers for Pharma 4.0 is having data integrity by design, and then the process of evolving internally to make all of your options digital so that you can kind of evaluate your own digital maturity level with your process. So we'll kind of proceed on along and get into the details here. So the way that Validation 4.0 aligns with Pharma 4.0, which is seen as your digital way of handling the pharmaceutical processes, the industry regulation for digital processes that are coming out of the pharmaceutical industry and the life sciences industry. All of those things that are looking at efficiency, data integrity, automation, making your life easier based off risk assessments and things like that. Those are all the same kind of principles that we're seeing with Validation 4.0 because we want to align between all those things. So we want to have interconnectivity with our various processes. That's going to make your digital maturity evolve better because all of your digital systems are going to connect to each other. So you can kind of synchronize your process and align your validation checkpoints that are digital with your production processes, which are also digital, to make those more efficient. So rather than having all of these separate hybrid-based or paper-based processes that were a little more difficult to align with because you're basically just like handling multiple binders worth of batch records and then binders worth of validation protocols and things like that don't really talk to each other in the paper world. And now you have them all digitally and you can link them up, you can sync them up to kind of make your entire process go smoother. So you've got validation built in to your process because it's all available now with digital systems. Whether or not they're on the same platform or not, there's still the interconnectivity that can happen with integrations and having an API open compatible platform. So the next one is data-driven decision making. So when you have all of your data available digitally, you have all of these new features that are available to you now. So you can access all the data instantly, much more quickly than if you had paper or hybrid processes and you're kind of searching through maybe file drive explorers for things that you've scanned and uploaded, or worse, you're having to go to document management facilities to get paper binders and things like that to then look at the data that you captured years ago. You're actually able to see all of your data immediately, so it's all kind of available real time, and then you can run reports on the data, because when the data becomes digital, they are considered digital data points that you can now pull queries on. You can find trends, you can search, you can use the data that you now have immediate access to that's been collecting over time. So your data source is going to be pretty large for how much data you've collected. And you can actually use that for things like predictive analysis to say, okay, every time I do a validation on this particular system, right after I've done XYZ process, it fails. So maybe I should put in some extra safeguards, maybe some extra changeover procedures or things like that that will prevent these things from happening in the future, because you can actually see that as a trend now that all the data is available to you, rather than it being kind of hidden and obscured and only something that you look at when an auditor comes to ask you, to see an old binder or something like that. It's all now visible and available for you to see and use to analyze your data. Same thing can be used for continuous improvement. So when you're seeing those issues, you can now have actual feedback loops where you can feed those validation outcomes back into the manufacturing process. So if you've got new things being validated, like upper and lower limits, critical quality attributes, critical process parameters, set points, anything like that you've got that is something that is being validated, and maybe it's not the level that you expected, but it's now the new validated level, and you need to feed that back into your process control strategy, your user requirements, anything that you need that's going to assist with your process, like sample point matrices, anything that's going to kind of be a feedback loop where you need to now report the new information for the validated ranges and parameters back into your process. Those things can be handled a lot easier now because it's digital. So you can, rather than it being a manual effort of having to know that now I have a new parameter, I need to go into this other system, into this other binder, into this other area, which is now maybe my batch record process, and update these things. You can actually just make those things talk to each other with certain connectivities that you could set up in the different systems, so that it knows when you have a process parameter change that it can just automatically feed that back to wherever it needs to go in the process. And then you have a much more adaptable process. So things digitally, digital things in general are much more flexible typically than paper things in general. It's a little easier to, for example, copy and save as to get a new document, rather than having to take like a paper document, on paper and then recreate that document as a copy. If you do that digitally, it's almost instant in just any word processing system that you might have. So when you're talking about process operations and validation operations that are happening digitally, those things are easy as well. You can get new protocols, you can get issues, you can change your process, you can change your validation strategies. They can go through the correct workflows, the appropriate approval cycles. All that stuff is automated so that you can be flexible in your process and adapt and change things as you need to. And you can even use adaptive learning models like AI to help evolve your validation strategies. We already have seen where some folks are developing their own AI using their digital validation platforms as a source of data. If they already have tons of validation data electronically available in a platform, and they can use that as training data to have their AI systems learn what the data looked like before, and therefore how to potentially create data that should be expected for similar scenarios. So those are some of the aligning factors between Pharma 4.0. Efficiency is one of the big reasons why people like to go digital. It's easier, it's more available, but it's also way more efficient because you don't have the same limitations and bottlenecks that are commonly seen and constantly seen in the paper world or in the hybrid world. So we can kind of transform these processes into these digital solutions, which end up saving way more time in the long run to execute electronically than it did on paper. If you think about the ability to do something as simple as a chamber, or anything that has like a temperature monitoring trend, if you have that pulled up on an electronic form, you're able to execute that electronically. With the same system, you can look at your monitoring system to find the alarms, the set points, the temperature reading values. If you have digital reading validation software for your sensors, all of that's available electronically. So you can just pull all that information straight into the electronic protocol rather than having to carry around a big binder, find a sensor map on paper, print out sensor readouts, and then attach them to your protocol with, appendices, numbering sequences, as guided by like your good documentation procedures. And then going and looking at trends and trying to get like a screenshot of the trend from your monitoring system online, and then, attaching that to your protocol. All those steps are now kind of instantaneous when you have digital systems talking to each other versus when they were on paper and there was just a lot of administrative and kind of tedious activities that you had to do to just get all of the data in one spot from different systems and print it all out for a paper solution. So all of these things we've seen as trends will make the processes more efficient, which will save you time, save you money, make your actual production faster, when you don't have to slow down and stop to do validation activities, which means you get to market quicker, and things like that. So these are some of the actual time savings and efficiency savings that we've seen when we've done studies with companies. A lot of these are available. These statistics are available on our website in case studies and things like that. So definitely lots of efficiencies to be gained when you have when you embrace validation 4.0 as one of the pillars of Pharma 4.0. It's also it's very easily scalable. When you are thinking of a large project, like adding a new facility to your already existing global pharmaceutical company, the kind of startup for that is pretty daunting and it's pretty large. And trying to get another facility or another site started using all of the same practices and processes that you already have in place at your other sites, assuming it's the same process, can be daunting as well, because you may have site-specific policies that the new site's going to put in, because maybe it's in a different country, it's in a different region, it's got different regulatory requirements, they have different language barriers, all these things that would potentially kind of slow the ability to hybridize with your existing processes. Those can be easily scaled when you're in a digital system, because you can easily use all of your core templates, your core content, your core policies, procedures, the actual process flows, the way that you handle your process, the way that it's built in and mapped out through your validation platform, and you can just apply that to an entire new facility, so that your kind of administrative burden is reduced now to just training the new facility on the use of the system and adding the user accounts. And now you have an entire new facility that's just an extra space in your platform, so that they can now use the same processes that are employed globally. And that's kind of hard to do when you're in a hybrid system or a paper system, because trying to share the access to all of the global policies and procedures, just historically we've seen is not as easy, because most facilities are gonna try to create their own processes and their own ways of handling the overall processes. So being able to hybridize and scale is a lot easier when you have everything digitally. So you can have the flexibility in manufacturing um, by the ability to switch between things like product lines for revalidation and supporting agile manufacturing. You're able to do that when you have digital technologies a lot easier than kind of manually switching all those things over. And then the actual rapid scaling of production. So you can increase your facilities, you can increase your sites that are using those processes pretty quickly with a validation platform rather than having to sync up and now create all new validation strategies for a new facility. So you can instantly put in, a site master validation plan for your new site and how you're going to handle it. But all of the processes and everything are already built in because it's all digital and it's already mapped out. And you already have a successful way that you're employing that with your other locations. So it's easy to scale up. And then if you need to scale out where you are looking to adopt multiple processes, that's something that's easy to do as well, because when it's kind of in a digital world, you're able to expand and add on without having any limitations or restrictions that you might kind of see whenever you're having to create an entirely new process from scratch in the paper world or in a hybrid setting. So you can use the infrastructure that you already have, for example, an equipment validation process, and then tweak it slightly to now use it for a facilities validation process or a process validation process or methods or whatever you need to do. You can just add on to the scope of the validation practices that you can currently do in your platform and expand those to as many as you need. So it's pretty easy to scale up when you've got your kind of digital realm. So we have a handbook that is available for on our website. It's available. That's got a lot of these principles in it. So I'm just going to go over a few of those that you'll be able to see in the validation 4.0 and digital validation handbook. So we have some foundational pillars that we kind of like to focus on for the validation 4.0 principles in general, and those are for being able to leverage your digital systems to automate and optimize your validation processes. So the ability to digitalize the process is kind of step one in the foundation. So you take all of your traditional paper and hybrid-based processes, and then you actually convert them into a digital format. And when we say digital format, it doesn't necessarily mean that your paper form is now just available online, but there are also digital smart features that are built in. So, for example, your protocol now is instead of having check boxes and places where you're typically writing in with pen and with wet signatures, there are places now that you can have built-in choice lists. So you can have drop downs. You can have built-in places where you can cross-reference externally to other URLs, other systems, other documents within the same platform. You can do automatic linking of automatic reporting of trace matrices through linking your requirements to your protocols. So if you do a link from that particular protocol to whatever requirements it's satisfying, it'll automatically show up in your requirements trace matrix so that you can use that to see all of your requirements being satisfied by various tests within the system, because they're all in the system, they're all talking to each other. When your entire validation process is in there, it's easy to build in these kind of smart features. If you have things like maybe a critical quality attributes specification document, you can build those in as smart feature property fields, or use smart tags or IDs or things like that to automatically pull those attribute values through the rest of your documents. So you know exactly when you type it in one time in the specification, you don't have to worry about typing the same value correctly into your process control strategy and your reports and your protocol to test against it. It automatically knows it's looking for this particular value, so it pulls it from the source and it feeds it through to all of your documents so that you can have that kind of data sharing happening between the documents that are supposed to talk to each other, to eliminate those kind of copy paste headaches that we always see whenever we're looking at things in a hybrid or a paper setting. So digitalizing the content helps to automate it and helps to optimize it, because it's going to reduce the errors from having to manually recreate all of that content. Second one is integration. So seamless flow of information across the different systems and processes. And that is kind of multi-sided. So you have the information flow across processes internally, like within your validation platform itself. So that includes having, maybe your digital batch records, talking to your digital logbooks, talking to your digital protocols, talking to your digital specifications, and having all those things automatically report back into digital reports, and things like that. So those are all talking to each other. Your processes can talk to each other. Your validation processes can talk to each other. Your manufacturing process can talk to your validation process. All those things are having these pathways of flow of information that are available when you have everything digital. And then externally to that, you can also talk to your other systems via APIs and integration. So when you have a digital validation platform and a digital validation solution that allows APIs and open integration, it's a little easier to have a software architect create those connectivities so that you can use whatever integration philosophies that are your preference. So whether that's like the JSON commands or webhooks or whatever, if you like to have the information pulled and sent upon request, or if you like to have the information pulled and sent automatically at certain intervals, things like that. Those are all things that you can set up with your integrations to have the different systems talk to each other and pull information. So those are all pretty customizable to whatever you'd like the information there to be shared across those things. So the next one, so the previous ones were kind of like the foundational pillars. These are the technological pillars. So I'll go to the right first. There's more information on these in the handbook. The Internet of Things. So you've got, your connectivity to all of your devices that use the internet to talk to each other. So not only your computer that you're using for your general operations and accessing your enterprise systems and things like that. We also have tablets, things that you're using on the actual production floors to record results or do monitoring or execute your validation protocols. You also have wearables. So if you've seen, there are things like wristbands, badges, things like that that can not only allow you access to your facility, but if those things are also tied to your credentials, they could allow you access to your enterprise systems and allow you access to perform digital validation tasks, things like execution using your wearable device, signing off protocols using your wearable device, because those things are tied to your credentials. They may be tied to biometrics, whatever security, system platforms that you guys have employed that you're allowed to use at your facility for access and entry and things like that are compatible with any digital system, including digital validation systems. So that is one of the items that kind of allows for the way that we're utilizing these digital technologies to kind of optimize processes in general and make things easier on ourselves. You've got blockchain for data integrity. So everything that you do is recorded in a digital world, and therefore it's got an audit trail, and therefore it's really easy to find, the paper trail, the who had what and when, and who, had this item checked out, and who executed this protocol. all those things that you need to find for traceability and security to make sure that everything is traceable and trackable throughout the entire product lifecycle is enabled with blockchain, which is available for when you have everything digital. When you have everything on paper, when you have everything hybrid, those things are not as easily queryable, not as easily visible. So it's a little harder to track those things without doing a really large, daunting paper trail exercise, whereas these things are kind of instantly queryable once you have it in a digital setting. Cloud computing, so having the ability to have all of your data stored on the cloud, which there are lots of security restrictions on now, so that it's very safe. It makes it more accessible. So anyone who's got access to the internet and who has gone through the correct access procedures to get access to the data and has been approved and all that, can now have the immediate access to the data that they need whenever they're needing to do analytical reporting on your data, if they're wanting to look at trends, if they're needed to do an investigation for into previous events for something that has come up new, if you're satisfying auditor requests to look at previous data, that's a lot easier now, so that you can show the auditor what you need to show them to get them out of there quicker versus having to keep them hosted for days on end while you retrieve these giant paper protocols from your document repository company that you've got storing all that stuff. So it's a lot easier when it's on the cloud. It's more accessible, and then you're able to use the data immediately to report, find trends, query, all that stuff. And then the one on the left here, kind of our main focus for today's webinar, is the digital validation systems itself as a technological pillar. So having the ability to have data integrity built in, so that any kind of good documentation practices that you might have proceduralized, those are things that's already going to be adopted, that are regulatory requirements, because all of the principles, regulations, policies, anything that's needed for compliance is going to be built in inherently to a validation platform. And then anything that you have that is just a procedural requirement that you've established yourself due to your own preferences about your operations can also be programmed in, so that you can have all that stuff inherently being operated without having to rely on someone to follow a data integrity procedure to do things the right way. It's built in, so that they can't mess up the data integrity, because it's built in that way. So having that available helps reduce human error, helps all of your data remain compliant. You can actually access the data real time. Like we kind of mentioned before, you have the ability to analyze all that data now that's available kind of instantaneously. You can do the smart validation features. So any of the processes that I mentioned, process validation, equipment validation, facilities, computer systems, anything that you need to use for validation systems, you can have all these different smart features built in. I could go on about smart features all day, but having the ability to pull that information to and from your specifications into your protocols, having the ability to execute your protocols and immediately initiate like an issue form based on that particular test without having to go find a template, fill it out, attach it to your protocol. All these kind of relationships are inherently built in. So you could be executing a form, like one particular step, and something is wrong with that step. And then you hit, there's an issue. So now it's created a form, it's pulled a form from your particular templates. You can select between multiple ones if you'd like, if you've got a different form for anomalous results versus a fault versus protocol specification error, things like that. You can pull a different form, fill out the correct form, and it's automatically linked and tied to that test step in that test protocol. It's going to show up on your traceability. It's going to show up as a link in your reporting. So all those things are kind of automated, built in inherently, so that you can validate smarter, better, and more efficiently. So that includes the online test execution. So you can actually fill those forms in online using your electronic signatures, credentials to sign off on rows rather than having wet signatures. And then, of course, if you've got open API integrations, then you can utilize those in multiple different ways. If you have maybe a computer maintenance system that you want to pull in information about your equipment, you could have an integration between that system and your protocols. If you have computer systems validation and you've got maybe some automated test scripts that another system is generating for you and actually operating through, you could pull in those test scripts to then report on them in a digital validation platform. So any kind of systems that you have that you want to talk to, you could do that. If you've got samples that you've sent out based on worst case sample points for cleaning validation, you could talk to your LIMS labware system regarding those samples. So all those integrations help with the kind of digital validation of your entire system. So there are a lot of implementation challenges that the handbook goes into in detail. I'm going to kind of focus on one of them, which is the one that I've seen the most just from being a subject matter expert at NEAT and at NEAT for the past 5 years as we've been implementing, tons of customers, and as a customer who was adopting a validation platform previously. So I'm going to focus on our regulatory one, but you can read more about these kind of implementation challenges that I have listed here in the handbook. So those are things like cultural resistance. We all know a lot of people think change is bad whenever they have to learn new procedures or learn new processes. There might be a little resistance just because they are already experts in the way that things were, and they don't want to lose their expertise or have to learn a new way when they're already good at their job the way that it was before. We can see where cultural resistance is a thing that might change, especially when you're going from a totally paper system to a hybrid or a digital system, and you need to have some training requirements there to have people utilize digital systems who weren't before. That kind of leads into number 2, where you need to you're assumed to need to be super tech savvy in order to adopt any of these digital validation systems, when really they're made for usability. They're made to have user interfaces that are supposed to be very intuitive and easy to operate, and make things go a lot easier and smoother and faster and more automated than if you were trying to find all these things on paper. So they're meant to be more user friendly than your current paper process. But thinking about the fact that you need all these technical skills may be something that might hold you back. So that goes into detail in the handbook there. Outdated CSV strategies is one of the ones I'm going to focus on in the next slide, or the next couple slides. And that's based on like what issues you might think there will be when you're talking about how to remain compliant when you switch to a digital validation solution from a paper-based one or from a hybrid type solution. So we'll look at those. And then having compatibility issues. Maybe you just have a ton of outdated software or hardware that you think might hold you back from digitalizing everything, like outdated sensors that will not talk to the system, outdated servers, on-site servers that you think you need more server space in order to utilize, a digital validation system that does cloud computing, when that's not the case because we have our own server agreement. And then data silos like access and format conflicts. So trying to figure out procedurally who needs the access, who needs to get into the system, what kind of data they should be able to see once they get into the system. All those things could be looked at as a challenge that you might think you need to overcome. Some folks are worried about how their auditors are going to see the information if only they have access to the system. So we have lots of checks and balances built in to kind of allow all of these things to be overcome easily with features that are built in to our digital validation platform, Neat. So those are kind of gone into in more detail in the handbook, but I'm just going to focus on the regulatory ones. So we have had a bunch of updates recently in recent years regarding Pharma 4.0 in general, and how digital solutions are kind of paving the way for evolution in our process landscape. So we've got a few things that just wanted to point out as highlights. So that is that we're looking at regulatory bodies, again, saying these things, that they want us to look at using risk to assess the impact of product safety, rather than just kind of trying to meet the requirements and the regulatory compliance. If we use risk to assess our approaches with the data that we now have in our digital systems, then we can use that to justify new validation strategies that are more efficient, more effective, and result in better overall quality, rather than just doing paper exercises to meet a regulatory requirement that is assumed to be needed. So, second one, the preferred method of documenting your validation is actually the least burdensome documentation approach. So a lot of people still think that you need the more documents, the better. The more protocols, the more specs, the more justification, the more issues, the more paper overall that you have, the better it looks in the filing, or the better it looks in an audit scenario. And that's not the case anymore. So we're seeing that regulatory bodies are recommending that everyone use your risk-based approaches. You revise your procedures to allow you to be flexible. And while everything is kind of built in inherently to meet the regulatory requirements, that allows you the flexibility to leverage documentation where you can, reduce testing where you can based on your risk approaches, based on studies, based on things like that, to just come up with the least burdensome documentation approach that is required. CFR Part 11 compliance guidelines now have specific requirements for electronic signatures and electronic records. So that's all kind of built into any digital system that is kind of advertised as being accessible and utilizable by pharmaceutical companies, life sciences companies, any highly regulated industry will have those things built in inherently. And then the agencies are allowing for the pathways to kind of accommodate the iterative digital innovation. So it's more acceptable to have a process that aligns with adapting your process as needed at the time. So you have real-time release, for example, on your process, as you have all this data now that's available digitally. You've got the validation, you've got the batch records, the process, the requirements, everything that you've shown to be met, the sampling, all of that is available real time, so that you can do a real time release in your system of that content, of that process, of that product. So those are things that following this specific step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 approach now can be done all at the same time, instantaneously, because you have all of the information available. And the regulatory bodies understand that and are allowing for those things to exist, to be adaptable with the digital solutions. And then they also allow for the sandboxes. So usually whenever you have a platform that you are configuring, setting up, customizing, there's things that you want to change or set up or map out in it, allowing for the ability to have a sandbox to do those things first, to kind of experiment low risk. Those things are allowed and recommended to do for the regulatory bodies. So that, again, once you get to your validation environment, your production environment, one that's not the sandbox, not the test environment, your documentation burden is way less, because you've you've already done your kind of low risk stuff in your sandbox. So all of these are kind of trends that we're seeing that allow for the digital pathways to kind of be paved for us to take and to utilize. So I'm going to quickly just kind of summarize the biggest pain point, which is the regulatory challenges. So one of the ways that we can see customers overcome this challenge is really just to take a look at your process and make sure that it's aligned with what is being allowed today with the the regulatory requirements that are in place. So you're looking at the requirements in the FDA, you're looking at Part 11 compliance, you're looking at ISPE guidelines, GAMP5, all that stuff, and it's allowing you to do certain things. But what we see most is that it's the customer's internal procedures that are typically the things that are holding them back. And they could be updated to align with the regulatory compliance to make the processes easier to adopt. So you look at things like ensuring that your vendor assessment process is clear, because if you can assess your vendor and you have good justification to say that you have assessed this vendor, you know that they are reputable, they have documentation that you can leverage, they have good history of implementation. Now you can leverage all their documentation that they give you because you assessed them, as is allowed by the regulatory bodies. So anything that they give you, you can now leverage and you don't have to do it yourself. You should be flexible in accepting the format and the structure of the things they give you. It actually says, like specifically written out in the GAMP5 guidance, not to rewrite the things that vendors give you just because you want to slap your own logo on it or conform to your own formatting, table of contents rules that you might have in your internal procedures. Those are all things that the regulatory bodies are not looking for. But if you have a procedure that says you have to do it, then they're going to call you out on it. But it's not required. It's only, it's only something that we see as a common preference in the customer documentation. But what that does is it results in customer having more to do than what they actually needed to do. So it makes it harder to implement when you have all these internal rules in place where they're not actually required from a compliance standpoint or regulatory standpoint in the industry. Leveraging the GAMP5 second edition principles to reduce your overall documentation burden. So that is only documenting test evidence, putting things like log into the application, click on button Y, go here. Those are all things that could be put into your prereqs or your procedure section. And then when you have actual steps that you're executing against, those are the ones that say, did this pass or fail? Yes or no, acceptance met, those kinds of things. So having just your test steps and your proving steps recorded in your test cases, using your risk-based approach to eliminate test requirements. So like using the computer systems assurance approach to reduce your scripted testing, maybe just focus on unscripted testing because you've got a risk assessment that says you're allowed to do that for low risk features. Doing things like only testing worst case soils, like if you have lots of different products in your facility and it's really hard to clean in between each one and do full testing for every single changeover, assess all of your products against each other, find out which one is the hardest one to clean, and then if you can clean that one, then you could leverage that information to say that you can clean the rest of them under the same circumstances without having to do an entire set of revalidation changeover testing every single time. So using those things, using those critical thinking skills, those risk assessments, those the ability to leverage documentation because you have assessed and justified that you can adequately, using that is what will actually result in a better quality system, a better quality product, and it looks cleaner and it's more effective, more efficient when you're looking at things from an auditor's perspective, rather than just doing a bunch of kind of unnecessary paper activities to satisfy a requirement that is not any longer required because we have so many updated regulatory practices now that allow for these things to happen in the digital world. So a lot of those kind of thinkings are considered obsolete, and we can adapt and make our lives a lot easier if we do that. I see I'm coming up to end of time. I want to leave some room for questions. So we've got, I just have some tips in here about how to make a validation plan when you're implementing a digital validation platform that will allow you to basically go live with it very quickly and very easily. And that includes all the things I just talked about, leveraging specifications, leveraging testing, using risk assessment, um, and your vendor assessment to do all that stuff. If you have all that stuff written in your validation plan, then you're meeting your own internal requirements, and then you're kind of all set whenever you are adopting these strategies. So those are some tips that you can look at, and we'll share these slides after the fact too. And then this was just an informational slide about how you can reduce testing when you switch from the old school CSV style approach of validating a new digital validation platform and implementing that into your overall life sciences process, and how it's a lot easier when you adopt the new allowed CSA approaches that are coming out of the new regulatory guidance documents. So you can see a big reduction in testing. You can reduce paperwork up to 80% if you just adopt the new regulatory strategies that are coming out and that are allowed by the regulatory bodies. So that's just an example. If you want to implement a digital validation platform like Neat, adopting these strategies will make that implementation headache way less for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amy. You're right. We are getting towards the end here, but we really appreciate that in-depth look at Validation 4.0. There are a lot of great insights there on what the future is and what we're quickly coming up to. Because as much as I say the future, it is literally tomorrow that things like Validation 4.0 and Pharma 4.0 are going to be implemented wide across. We do have a few questions here. Donald put in a few questions in the chat specifically about Neat's current features. So I'm going to try to group all three of these together. Donald asked, you mentioned linking to a validation mapping system. Does Neat currently have that feature? Do they have an automated smart validation feature and also any data analysis features? So can you talk about the features that Neat GX has around
Yeah,
validation
sure.
4.0?
Yeah, so we have a lot of features built into our application that we kind of use the term as smart validation features. So that includes things like the automatic issuance of the discrepancy forms, deviation forms, issue forms that come out of testing. That includes the electronic execution of the forms, having the smart fields built in that allow you to have things like choice lists, pass, fail, yes, no, having the ability to report on those test cases. So we do have automatic kind of data analysis built in where we have the ability to pull a summary on all of the discrepancies that you have in the system to find trends on things like root cause, or maybe the system that it involves, so that you can say, oh, this is a problem system, or we see this root cause a lot. It's, it's a procedure is wrong. Let's revise our procedures. Let's change our CAPAs to make sure that we do procedure review, more frequently than 18 months. Maybe we need to do it every 12 months or something like that, because we see the procedure is wrong as a common reason why these issues are getting pulled up. You can pull all of your results from your test cases. So if you had 100 tests in a single protocol, you could pull a report at the end that said 100 tests, here they are. Here is the overall status. They are pass failed. Here's how many steps passed in each one. Here's how many steps failed in each one. Here's the issues that are within each one. And then we have those smart features with the requirements trace matrix. So if you have the tests, you can say which requirements they're satisfying, and then that's automatically pulled in at the end to the requirement trace matrix that will list all of your requirements and then give you a hyperlink to exactly which test it was satisfied by. So we do have a lot of smart features built in. I feel like that was like the tip of the iceberg. We literally have so many features. I wish I had enough time to go over them all because they're really exciting. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. That you're right. You touched the tip of the iceberg, but I think you got to the heart of Donald's questions there. I also put a resource in the chat, our request a demo page. You can request a one-on-one demo with a Neat specialist who will go in depth into your specific needs and answer those questions hands-on while looking at the Neat GX platform. So that's always a resource to you, as well as our monthly demo webinars. We have demo webinars every month at the end of the month, where we run through with one of our process engineers as well, or solutions engineers rather, who answer those same questions after taking an in-depth look at the platform. We are at the end here. There's one question I want to get to from Rita here before we end out. Rita asked, is there consistency in how your customers are implementing CSA?
Yeah, we're seeing it now as a more common approach. We have the ability. We're considered reputable, so we do kind of we provide a bunch of information to our customers about how to about ourselves that will allow them to assess us better in their vendor assessment documentation, so that they can leverage all the stuff that we have. So we have functional requirements, we have specifications, we have OQs, we have IQs, we have all the functional testing, we have requirements trace matrices that link our testing to our requirements, and we want our customers to utilize all of that so that they don't have to do any functional testing of our system at all. So that whenever you're looking at accepting the system, the only thing that you're doing is making sure that what you wanted us to set up, the process information, like what kind of process it is and what kind of documents you wanted, that's what you're confirming. Like, yep, I wanted a process validation process with a process control strategy and a CQA and a CPP, and that's what I got. So that's all. It's kind of a check as far as what you have to do when you're looking at a good CSA approach. And we recommend our customers use that, and we are seeing adoption of that with the majority of our customers.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Amy. Madavi, Peter, I see your questions in there. We are just at the end of the time here, unfortunately, but we'll make sure that somebody reaches out to make sure that you get the answer to those questions. Amy, again, I really appreciate you joining us. You're no stranger to our webinars, and we hope to have you back soon. But this was a really great presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time. All right, and I will cut now to talking about some of our upcoming events. We have more webinars. I talked about our monthly demo webinar. That one for September is coming up in just a couple weeks, September 25th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll talk with one of our sales solutions engineers who will walk us through the platform live and in person, talking about all of the Neat GX features that you're asking about, and then answer your questions live as well. Again, that's September 25th. You can find more information about that at neat.com/news and events and on our webinars page. If you want to come see us in person, we're going to be at the ISPE annual meeting and expo October 13th in Orlando, and in Connects Validation and GMP University Europe in Dublin, November 7th. So either side of the world that you're on, if you're in North America or Europe, you can come visit us at those places. We really appreciate your feedback. I want to mention again our short survey because we want to hear from you, especially about what topics you want to hear next. We're always planning ahead, and we want to stay on the forefront of what you want to hear so that we can keep getting you come back and get the information that you need. So there's a QR code on the screen now. This isn't going to be included in the email you get for attending. This will be included in the slides if you download those afterwards to look back on. And there's a link in the chat. So plenty of places. We ask that you just take a couple minutes, fill out that survey for us. That'll help us plan our next upcoming webinars. But I know I'm a few minutes over. Thank you to those of you who have stayed after to hear from me and hear from Amy and hear your questions. We really appreciate it. And again, we hope to see you on the next Neat Insights webinar or at one of our conferences coming up soon. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.